This is the industrial side. Most industrial businesses are either won or lost in the day-to-day operations. These are conversations with the operators who run these firms, talking about how they run them, what works, and what doesn't. Mike Montesi, how you doing, sir?
Hey, Brian. Things are going. I'm pretty good. How about yourself?
Not bad. I'm glad that you had some time to talk to me today.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so like you're in the aerospace industry, you have a very specific vertical that you focus on. I'd like to dive into that a little bit. So I guess my first question is, what do you do and for who?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I run an aerospace components manufacturer that serves both defense and commercial and space. We're mainly metal fabricated parts. So we don't do any carbon fiber. We don't do fiberglass or other composites. In a nutshell, we buy metal and cut it up into complex components, generally structural, that we will sell to aerospace companies, helicopter, aircraft, etc. And it's all customer IP. So we are making parts to their blueprints. They specify what material we can use. If there's any outside processing, let's say chemical milling as an example, they specify which chemical milling houses are approved that we can use. And then it's up to us, which of our people and machines we want to use to make a finished product that needs to conform to different specifications, tolerances, meaning how wide is the hole that's punched into the part. Things of that nature. And so as long as it abides by those different dimensions, it's all gravy. We ship the part to the customer. It's a mix of defense and commercial. Generally, those customers have different priorities. Defense cares more about speed, on-time delivery, because lives are at stake. Commercial cares more generally about margins and price competitiveness, and they have more predictability on their revenue and sales cycle, and so they can plan things better. And we work with both. There's pros and cons of working with both. We have the shortest long on-time delivery, the quickest on-time delivery, the shortest lead times of suppliers in our group. We have more unique ways we can make a part than any other of our competitors of a similar size from square footage standpoint. That means we don't have a lot of CapEx redundancy. We don't have 5 of the same type of CNC machine as an example. We can make a part in more unique ways than our competitors can. And we have a lot of in-house capabilities, such as heat treating, painting, welding, which means we don't have to send a part halfway through the production cycle to an outside heat treater, which adds 2 weeks of lead time, and then to an outside welder, which adds another 2 weeks, etc. So many of our customers are willing to place work with us because they can get the part faster than from another competitor. Sometimes because we don't have the redundancy with CapEx, we don't benefit from the same types of economies of scale that other competitors who can do fewer things but can probably do them more efficiently than us can. So if a customer is more price sensitive, the downside may be that we can't be price competitive as much, but generally, you're talking about lower dollar parts in absolute terms compared to the value of the finished craft. So it can come down to, all right, well, maybe we're a little more expensive than a competitor. Maybe that could be $200 more for a part. But if you have an aircraft on the ground situation, which is costing you $30,000 per day, then us being able to deliver that part 3 weeks faster is definitely worth the slight premium.
And so how do you gain customers? Is it like OEM or potentially like a aircraft owner? Like let's say even like a American Airlines has they own a jet and they need some sort of thing to be done on the FBO or the MRO side of things. Like where do you come in? How do they even find out about you?
Yeah, so we wouldn't deal with them directly. So I guess there would be 2 ways with let's say a commercial airline getting a hold of our parts. So they would purchase their aircraft from one of the OEMs, and we would be selling our parts to the OEM ahead of time. And then from the MRO standpoint, we're talking about aftermarket. So We personally don't deal in that space, but some of our competitors who do would be selling parts to the aftermarket distributors or the MROs directly. We do have the ability to sell our parts to the same OEM, like a Boeing, for instance, who could sell those to aftermarket customers like the DLA.
So your main customers are like Boeing, Airbus, Gulfstream, companies like that.
Yeah, the majority of our customers are large OEMs, and then we also have some tier two suppliers. So we sell our parts to intermediaries who will take smaller components and put them together in a large assembly and then sell to those same OEMs. So
And so, like, what's the frequency in terms of their purchasing behavior? Like, do they need something once a quarter? Are there monthly orders that come in? Like, how does it work?
So on the commercial side, they're generally tying their demand for our parts to their anticipated demand from the airlines, who generally will be the ones purchasing their craft. And then on the defense side, it's usually tied to budgetary news that's above my head. But we sell our parts to an OEM who then sells to those different DoD departments. So
Got it. Got it. Got it. So I guess in terms of your team, like, I guess how do you like plan for staffing when the demand can be so random? It seems like it's kind of just based on the customer's needs. Like, how do you plan for who you need in-house to be able to produce the materials for the customers?
yeah, so I guess the analogy would be the funnel that dictates how fast the water is pouring through it. We use our estimating, so our submitting to RFQs to act as that funnel. So if we are at capacity, for instance, all of our workers and machines are occupied, then we would no quote new RFQs and just turn down new work. If we are under capacity, then we can lower our prices. And that's kind of the way we do it. We haven't changed our headcount much in compared to other industries, but we can flex up and down if needed. The way I prefer is through second and third shifts. So we run two shifts. First shift is about 90% of our total headcount. If we were to grow aggressively, then that would most likely be adding bodies to second shift and then beyond that third shift. But there's always going to be certain roles where you wouldn't ever need a second or third shift. You have to have a full-time employee there, but it may never be a 40-hour a week task, but you need to have somebody, manning some of these lower volume operations.
What kind of materials are you producing? Is this like electronic components or like yeah, what's the specific thing that you kind of produce for the most part in terms of supplying for these like aircraft partners?
Yeah, good question. Not electronic, not mechanical, not flight safety, all metal fabricated. So mostly structural components, generally
Yeah.
on the exterior of the craft.
Yeah, so like my background, like after high school, I was an aircraft mechanic for 3 years, and if I even saw one like little rivet that wasn't like fastened in on a plane, I would tell the pilot not to leave. So like all those little components are very important. Like it's critical because like this thing could be between life or death of whoever's flying the plane, whoever is on board of the plane. So it's what you're doing is really important stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a complicated industry, complicated business. There are so many steps that go from quote to cash, as you say,
Yeah.
responding to a quote, submitting your bid on a quote, to winning the work, buying the material, programming the CNC machine, engineering the part, meaning process planning it. How are we going to make a part using our workers and equipment, making the part, applying any outside processing that may need to take place, shipping the part, getting paid. There's a lot more steps in this industry than in any other industry that I've been a part of. It makes sense. There's a lot of quality control and compliance requirements because you're dealing with people's lives. Like
And
you don't
so
want something to malfunction on a craft that is carrying people on it.
yeah, and is most of your work kind of like derived through RFQs and stuff like that? Like official requests for proposal, where you have to submit the details and the specs of what you'll do, or do you get customers through other methods?
Yeah, so it's unusual because I have had sales roles in the past early in my career where you're selling a specific product. With us, the business development is more about instilling confidence in a potential customer, and the goal is to get onboarded as a supplier. Once you're onboarded as a supplier, then what parts you make, which the customer owns the IP of, so it's the customer's parts that they're
Right.
asking to make for
Yep.
them, that's going to be determined through the RFQ and bidding process. But these customers have to take on quite a bit of, resource investment themselves to before they can feel comfortable enough to onboard a supplier. So that generally will send a team to the supplier's facility, make sure it's up to standards. There's a lot of paperwork,
Of course. Yeah.
certify that you don't buy material from certain conflict zones as an example, or you're not engaging in any immoral labor practices. There's a lot of things you have to certify, and they'll generally visit a couple times before they feel comfortable. And then once you're onboarded, well, if you let them down, that's pretty impactful. So they will generally give you a fewer part numbers than they may need to give the supplier a chance to vet themselves, prove they can deliver parts that don't get rejected by their quality team, parts that are delivered on time. And then if you can hit those marks, you'll get more and more RFQ.
There's very little margin for error, essentially.
Yeah, especially with new customers. And it could take up to 2 years between requesting the customer visit and for them to visit and then get onboarded as a supplier. They will generally conduct their own audits, so their own quality vetting. And then we also use neutral third parties, for instance, AS 9100. Every year, generally, they will come in and conduct audits for suppliers and our competitors. And then if you have any processes like welding or heat treating, then there's the third party vetting, NADCAP as an example associated with those. And if you are not NADCAP approved for welding, as an example, then you're not allowed to weld any of the customer's parts in-house. And so then you would need to make a part maybe 60% of the way to completion. And then when you get to the point where there's welding that needs to be done, if you're not NADCAP welding certified, you have to send it to a third party outside welder who is NADCAP welding certified, and that adds expense because they need to make a profit and at least a couple of weeks of lead time. And so having those certifications in house can kind of give you a competitive advantage because you can quote the same part at a lower price because you're realizing that third party welders their markup and margin is.
Yeah, and with all the specifications, like how do you manage quality standards within the company? Because it seems like the margin for error is low. There's a lot of specifications from the certification boards. I'm sure that you're trying to operate within. Like, do you have a quality team, or like how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, our quality department, it's about 30 people. It's our second biggest department after the actual production, and checks and balances. That's really up to my discretion, but the way that we've been doing it is to be very cautious. So some companies will wait till the part is completed and ready to ship to have a quality inspector check it. But then what happens there is that if it's deemed non-conforming, then you scrap the part and you've wasted that time and money, the expense of the material and the labor up to that point, and you have to start over. So what some suppliers, including ourselves, will do is add in-process inspection steps. So we have between 2 and 10 different steps, depending on how complex a part is, where if there's 8 operations that a part needs from start to finish, between certain operations, an inspector will come in and say, "Hey, was this part formed correctly in the prior step?" Okay, it was. But if they deem it isn't, then well, maybe you've only lost 1/3 of the total cost of that part from start to finish. And that's what we do. If a part has had some change in the last year to the process, meaning either you bought a new a piece of equipment, or you moved into a new facility, or you changed your CNC program used to make the part, then it's subject to what's called a first article inspection, which is an added layer of inspection taking place at the end before you can ship the part. So, and on top of that, some customers will have what they call a source inspector, where they pay a third party inspector who we give cubicles and some floor space at our facility to inspect the part after our quality team has inspected the part. It was just an added double check. And then once we ship the part and it goes to their facility, they'll inspect it. So there's so many different eyes looking at these parts. And that's the reason why for the large part, there's such a low incidence of, God forbid, there's such a low incidence of things going wrong. And that's in part because both best practice and industry requirements are so strict.
So I guess, like, how would you classify your company? Like, would you say it's a CNC machining company, metal fabrication company? Like, what box would you put yourself in?
Yeah, so we do a mix of sheet metal and CNC machine parts, which is unusual. Most of our competitors are either one or the other. CNC machines are going to be, large machines the size of my office that are able to cut and shape a block of metal from all different angles. If it's 5-axis, it can go up, down, around, under, and inside of a part to cut either through shear force, lasers. There's different types of CNC machines. Sheet metal parts are generally two-dimensional. They start as a piece of sheet metal that's 4 by 12 feet most commonly, and up to a half-inch thick. And for those parts, they're generally formed through brute force. So we have stretch forming, which is an unusual, it imagines wrapping a burrito with a piece of aluminum foil, which would be the piece of sheet metal. So a mold in the shape of the burrito is what the sheet metal is stretched through shear force over. And we have a very large, impressive sheet metal former that was built by Igor Sikorsky's best friend, Romeo Lally, in the 1940s. The first Sikorsky helicopters were made by the founder of Sikorsky using this massive stretch former that we have.
And yeah, so, like, let's talk about technicians. Like, what qualifications do you need to bring somebody into this kind of operation? And, like, what do you look for in general?
Well, I guess it really depends on what function, but we prefer anybody on the shop floor. We like to bring in people who can read a blueprint, who have experience in this industry. What's unique about this is, in any given day, an operator could work on 3 different parts that look completely different from each other and are for different customers. So it's not a plug and play environment where you're doing the same thing day after day and running a machine the same way. So there needs to be a greater level of problem solving and engineering acumen than in other manufacturing environments that I've been a part of. And there's so many different types of roles we have. We have CNC programmers who will program the path that the CNC machine takes when cutting the metal, who obviously need to have some of the most advanced blueprint reading knowledge. We have our engineering team, which process plans how to make a part. So they'll look at our capabilities, what equipment do we have? If we have 5 different two-dimensional metal cutting machines, which one makes the most sense to make this part? And they will just do the work order. So they will create the work order from scratch. This operation, meaning shop floor worker on machine X, will happen first, this will happen second, and then this will happen third, and then we need to bring it to our heat treating department after that, and then it needs to sit and dry for 24 hours. All this is laid out on the work order. And so the work order packet plus our the raw material certification packets can be up to 100 pages long. And so each shop floor worker needs to be able to look at the work order, which is printed out in the pamphlet, see what was done the preceding step, make sure it was signed off correctly, make sure everything matches his understanding of it, do his step, and then if in process inspection is laid out in the work order after him, needs to bring it to the process inspector. And so there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, in an average day, we ship, a few dozen different unique part numbers.
Mhm.
That's like from a high level business challenge perspective, it's the opposite of, let's say, like a metal canning manufacturer where you're making one product and you're making hundreds of thousands of these cans per day, and throughput and OEE and these other manufacturing metrics where you have fixed resources come into play. With us, because we make so many different unique types of parts, there's always going to be lost time through setting up a machine, finishing your production run, setting down the machine, picking up the next work order, looking at the blueprint, loading the next material, that there's going to be a lot more lost time and downtime than in other manufacturing environments, no matter how smooth things are planned and run. So we just try to mitigate that as much as possible, and that's why having experienced, qualified, capable, smart, sharp, driven people has more of an impact on the bottom line here than in the canning example I mentioned.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, and I think maybe like to take a 15,000 foot view, there's a lot of you know, metal fabricators, precision part manufacturers, just manufacturers in general that are thinking about should I go into the aerospace category since like that's taking off quite a bit in the last 5 years. Like, what are the good and bad parts about being a supplier for aerospace in general?
Yeah, so let's say I had $1 billion and I want to get into the industry. There's two ways you can do it. You can either start a company from scratch or you can buy an existing company. I would go the buying an existing company route because you're bypassing the biggest hurdle, which is getting onboarded as a supplier. If you start a company from scratch, and as I mentioned earlier, it could take 2 years between contacting a potential customer and getting onboarded as a supplier for that customer. You could spend money setting up, building up a manufacturing space and going up to 2 years with zero revenue.
Right.
So by buying an existing company that's already been onboarded as a supplier for their customers, you inherit their purchase orders, you inherit their ongoing relationships with the customer. So that's probably why there's more acquisition interest than startup interest in the space, because
Right.
entry are so much higher than if you just, I have an idea of, a new energy drink. Well, you just need FDA approval. You don't need to wait on 2 years for 7-Eleven to agree to, onboard you as a supplier. Any startups in this space generally are limited to those that have some sort of innovative IP,
Right.
which is not us. That would be more of like a, I don't know, TransDigm or some of these other companies that are not in our category.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's sort of, I mean, it's just a weird place because like defense spending is going straight up. So there's a defense category, then there's consumer travel category, which, went in the downward trend at COVID and then spiked back up after COVID. So it seems like a general area where there's a lot of opportunity, but it's in some ways not so clear who's positioned best to take advantage of that and to invest in aerospace supplies and parts and machinery to facilitate this like infrastructure.
Yeah, and the CapEx requirement's extremely high. It's
Mhm.
it's hard to get in, and you generally see longer time periods between when a company is founded and then once it hits that tipping point and then starts becoming profitable than in other industries.
Right, right.
We are between 40 and 80 years old, depending on how you want to qualify. The growth curve it wasn't linear. It was probably like this,
Right.
a lot slower than in other industries.
Yeah, I mean, but I think I do think you're in a stable industry. Like I think what you're doing is very mission critical. Like I assume like, the company's gonna succeed for years and years to come, probably beyond you and I's like time frame. So I think you're in a good path. And I I really appreciate your time, Nick. I think this has been like an interesting kind of path to like delve into and talk about a little bit more, kind of a different angle than what we've been going over the last few episodes. So I really appreciate this.
Yeah, no, for sure, Brian. And I really enjoyed our conversation. You and I both went to University of Chicago School of Business. I really enjoyed my time there, and I'm always happy anytime after this episode, happy to chat about anything. If you want to pick each other's brains, and thanks for having me and for taking the time as well.
No, that'd be great. And like additionally, like if listeners want to connect with you, I guess like whether from a customer's perspective or like a potential manufacturer in this space perspective, like what would be a good way to reach out to you? Like LinkedIn, email, what would be a good thing? I could put it in the show notes at the end.
Yeah, I would say, if they're interested in what our company can do for them, whether we can become a supplier, for instance, then I just would reach out to our main line.
Yeah,
And if they're interested in talking to me personally, then you can find me on LinkedIn.
awesome. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes. Nick, this has been great. I appreciate it a lot.
All
Thanks
right.
for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
All
Thanks
right.
so much.
Thanks.